It's great to meet you in person. Like we did the call ahead of time and apologize. I was late. I was doing a pitch and got caught up in it. But it was the Disney pitch and it was kind of relates to this is we were at Disney World as a family and we were using some points and we were kind of frustrated with the situation of what the loyalty environment has come up with. And so my wife and I at the pool went into a deep dive of what's our next loyalty brand. And IHG came up and we went a little bit too long into where we were going to the next one. And then I get into work on Monday and they're like, hey, do you want to moderate this? I'm like, that's so weird because that's exactly what I talk about.
Did you choose IHG? Was that the
Yes.
ultimate?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the different brand. I mean, I was a Starwood person for many years. And so I was disappointed when it got taken over. But I've always, been looking for that type of loyalty in a brand. And your hotels align very closely with, as we go through our life stages. So I'm super excited about like where it came in from, but I'd love to hear more about that and also what you do on a day-to-day.
Sure. Well, great to be here. I don't want to take for granted that people know what IHG is. I'm assuming many don't. So we're a big global hotel company. We've got 18 hotel brands, 6,000 plus hotels in over 100 countries. And that's brands, big scale brands like Holiday Inn Express, luxury or sort of main lifestyle upscale brands like Kintner Hotels and Hotel Indigo, and then luxury brands like Intercontinental, Six Senses. If you haven't heard of or seen Six Senses, I encourage you to check them out. Beautiful properties, Regent and so on. And so I lead the global marketing for IHG. We break that up really into three broad categories. That is marketing of our brands, and that includes our brands and more recently elevating the brand of IHG, really starting from zero and trying to build recognition and awareness of IHG. That includes marketing for our loyalty program, which includes public loyalty campaigns, life cycle marketing, all kind of things in that space. And then commercial marketing, roll up your sleeves, deliver revenue in the month for the month for our hotels.
Because that's easy to do, always.
Yes, yeah.
Just rains money. So on the interesting thing I find is there's not many brands that have to do local, call it states, and then international. So you get to do that.
Yeah.
What's the struggles and what do you have to like deal with both locally and internationally that is unique to your role?
So, I've been with the company 20 plus years. And so this role, this team of mine, I like to consider as relatively new. It's within the past 5 or so years. And I guess in a 20-year career, 5 or so is relatively new. What we've really set up is the idea of this kind of hub and spoke, centralized, quote unquote, marketing function. We have 18 brands. And, if you go back 5, 6, 7 years, we might have had individual marketing teams sitting in each individual brand, solving for each individual need of that brand. That could have included individual agency relationships, media, measurement, all things that go with and there are benefits to that model, but it is super inefficient. And you could take that challenge and you apply it all around the world. And so 6 or so years ago, we centralized that all into one team. But when I say centralized, we really have tried to set up a model that is this hub and spoke that has people really focused on the things that we need for them to focus on and feeling like an extension of that team. So you take the idea of commercial marketing. The commercial performance needs of the Middle East are different than the commercial performance needs of the UK, certainly of the US. The only way to solve for that really well is to have people very close to the commercial teams on the ground in those markets that pull together the marketing plans for those markets. But we want them to be tapped into this centralized ecosystem for speed, efficiency, scale, shared learnings. And that, that model, while it still has challenges, has allowed for us to kind of move quickly and leverage the resources that we have.
Yeah, I think Joe touched on that. The last one was the idea of bringing some of it consolidated in-house. So you guys have been doing it for 6 years now or 5 in-house?
Well, so I've got a digital background, so digital marketing. I started at the company 20 or so years ago, to basically begin internet marketing. I'm old. And so, basically at that time, we started bringing that in-house. And so we were buying search marketing back in the early days in-house. And so we've always had this DNA as an organization to hire really smart people that know their space, to buy our media in-house. We do all of our search in-house, almost all of our programmatic in-house, almost all of our creative in-house. But that doesn't mean that we are exclusively in-house. And so depending upon the need, depending upon the year, we kind of ebb and flow into vendors, agencies, where we need support, where we need capacity, where there are skills. So in a way, we're really more hybrid than we are kind of an in-house model. But at the heart of this engine is an in-house team that sort of is an SME team that buys media and manages.
So it's a good segue into what are like two pros and cons each of having media in-house, the way you guys handle it.
So the challenge or the process that you go through to bring this in-house, it almost first starts as an economic opportunity, right? And you go, well, I'm using a third party has to charge a certain fee, and if I were to hire this internally, almost always that pencils, and the math works out. Now, depending upon the year, and certainly now after COVID, the idea of adding a lot of headcount is an uphill battle. So it's not easy, but financially, there's a good case to be made. The other benefit is, at the end of the day, the people that on the team are going to care a little bit more about it than a third party will.
Right.
It doesn't mean there aren't super strong, qualified agencies and vendors, and we work with many that are great. But I still think there is an element of that they care about it a bit more. The challenges are what you would imagine. If you think about the idea of creating a culture and a team environment where a programmatic trader wants to join a hotel company and stay at a hotel company, or a creative or a search marketer, right? And so that just means you have to create a culture and an environment where they want to work and learn and maybe even explore other areas of the business, right? And so it's not right for everybody, but that is a little bit of the challenge. That maybe more so now even than it was a few years ago with the fight for talent. And so that's one of the challenges, creating an environment where these roles will want to stay embedded into a team.
So it's interesting. We see it all the time. It's not about the job anymore. It's about the experience and the camaraderie with co-workers and anything like that. So you have a great properties. Have you worked that into some of the loyalty of keeping your employees happy? Like, hey, go spend a weekend at this location or do this. Is that good?
Yeah, I was going to make a joke, but I'm not going to. Look, there are benefits of being at a hotel company, right? We get an employee rate. I mean, it's like you kind of like lean into, right. Well, here's why it's a great place to work. And if you like these kinds of things, then it's a great place to work. And again, that's not for everybody. If somebody, at some point they might feel like their career path requires them to do something else. And so to your point, we lean into the benefits of what it means to work at a hotel company. I have to make sure I create a culture within the team that they like what they do. And they like the team and they like the environment. And they feel like they're being developed. The team feels like they're being developed, even if they say, well, I ultimately want to, I'm a creative and at some point I might want to do something other than creative for the hotel industry. Yeah. And so, there are ways to ensure change and growth and development. But it has to be kind of a spectrum of things that you bring to the table to create an environment that someone wants to stay.
And in that environment, we see it all the time, being in New York City. How do you get people back in the office? Or does it have to be in office?
Yeah. I'll tell you, it's harder in a remote environment. And when I say harder, I mean culture. I don't mean getting the job done. I think most of those jobs can be done from home. It can be done. And I think if you're kind of looking at a spreadsheet and saying, well, my job is to do these 10 things, I can do these 10 things from home, then go, yeah, that's true, totally true. Yeah. But as a leader of a function, trying to create a culture where people are connected in a way that's, bigger and deeper than outside of work, the job just gets harder. to create those relationships. We have a ton of people who have joined the team within the past 2 years. And so we're only now partially back in the office. We have many that come in 2 days a week, and we're seeing a bit of a, how the team gels now and how they work together, and I think they see the value of that. But I'll tell you, in a fully remote environment, not impossible, but it just gets harder to create that culture and that thread that keeps people connected beyond the work, the relationships, that foundation of trust.
My number one pet peeve is my employees say, I work better at home. It's like, well, describe better. He goes, I get more done. I said, you do know that part of your job is actually interact with your coworkers and understand that in our office, you do get things that you don't get from a Zoom. So it's been a struggle to show them, hey, come in once a week and understand.
Yeah, sometimes it's less tangible. Again, I think if you literally take each job and go, can this physically done from home? The answer is often yes.
Yeah.
And we are quite flexible. And I've never been somebody that says you must be here, all these hours. We really do judge people based upon the work that they do, and make sure as long as the work's getting done, I don't really care. But I think that the foundation of relationships is so important to create a culture where people like what they do and they like the company. And seeing the pre-COVID IHG, during COVID, and now sort of coming out of that, it's just a little bit, it's harder to create that culture in a completely remote environment.
In programmatic, it's very hands-on keyboard. It's very pure learning, I find. Have you seen that bringing it in-house? Is that a con that people aren't teaching each other through different platforms that you guys use? Like, has that been a kind of challenge?
For me, what I find really exciting is the evolution over the past 5 years or so, where things that used to historically be quite traditional, that had to be bought in a certain way, can now be bought the same way we used to buy search, right? So somebody that came from a digital background, it's easy for me to point a lot of the leadership that had so much experience with digital and have them become experts at connected TV rather quickly. They sort of like look into it and go, actually, there's a lot of similarities here. And to your point, we're able to now buy almost all of that in-house. If we don't, it's often a bandwidth, right? We kind of go, we don't have the bandwidth for this particular campaign, and we will leverage a third party. So in many ways, there are a lot of benefits to the connected TV model because it allows us to be in a more traditional media sense in a very data-driven way. Almost everything we buy is data-driven.
Right.
Almost nothing that we buy that doesn't have some kind of targeting applied to it. And connected TV is a really big lever in that. And the platforms and the ecosystem really allow for it to be done in-house, assuming we have the capacity.
So parlaying that to our conversation earlier is sports and linear. So how do you see linear TV being self-servant? So how does linear work into CTV in your model?
Yeah, and we had this discussion yesterday, and I have one part of my mind that had a pretty strong view of, if I want everything to be data-driven, then what's the future of linear? And I struggle with it. And in the world of linear, in my mind, you're really dealing with live sports and news, assuming you want to still buy news. It's a little toxic. So let's say you want to avoid news. You're dealing with live sports, maybe some primetime shows. And what I was telling you yesterday is we buy a ton of CTV, connected TV, and we're pretty big in college football. And I hear far more about people seeing us in college football than I do in connected TV. And I try to balance that out with my mindset of like, okay, well, here I am saying everything's targeted. I want to lean into CTV because I can do segments, first party, third party. But here I am just sort of like turning on college TV. Now, I know it maps to our demographic, but it challenges my, what that mix should be. And so linear still plays a pretty big role for us. We do try to find opportunities clearly where someone will watch something live, and where there's a good match to our demographic, which either it's mostly sports related or through our partnerships.
So I would say it's almost a work in progress. We heard from Joe on the Dunkin' Donuts, like that one spot, which we all know has great impact, but there is a mixed model down the road where how do you balance the linear and the impact with the connected TV, which is so measurable?
Well, I think every year, if I were to have this discussion, I would say we're in our infancy. You know what I mean? I feel like we never leave our infancy.
It's a year mobile.
Yeah, the year of mobile, that's right. You know, we're in our infancy. What I mean by that is we're still at a point where you've got a pretty complex ecosystem. You know, while we want to say this is really measurable, it's not as measurable as we'd like it to be, particularly across platforms. And so you've got different platforms with their own measurement, and to try to track across platforms, there are ways to do it, but it gets complicated. And then to track across platforms and linear, and we buy CNBC as another example, sorry. So let's say we buy CNBC and we're buying connected TV and we buy, you know, and we've got these other placements. To understand the reach and frequency across all those platforms gets complicated. And that's why, in a way, we're still in the relatively early days, I think, of this ecosystem.
Well, COVID changed everything in 3 months, so no one was waiting for or expecting it. The crazy thing is Seinfeld and Friends and Law and Order got binged so much in 2020 because there was no content. Now we've swung the other way so much. So across LGTV, 75% of our time is spent streaming, but doesn't mean the other 25% of the sports is not super impactful.
Yeah.
So we run in this infancy stages where we expect everyone to be ready to measure it, and it's just not. We're not there yet because it's only been 2-3 years since the change happened so quickly.
And each platform is somewhat protective, as they should be, right? They're protective of their data and their insights and their analytics, and you know, the walls and the walled gardens are probably getting a little taller, and so sharing becomes more complicated. So it's just it's to navigate it is just an ever-changing challenge, I suppose.
Yeah, our president likes to talk about our ecosystem as a gated community. We don't want to be walled, but we want to make sure that we're privacy compliant, but still give you guys the access to the information and data you want. Because the new rise of the addressable, I'll call it, market, it's no longer, you know, addressable linear or addressable CTV. Like, it's all kind of addressable.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a work in progress. Now, we're at 12:30, so I don't want to hold anyone. Maybe 1 or 2 questions before we go out and eat and get on the track.
It's interesting thinking about some of your earlier comments around your in-house creatives. How do you keep them inspired and, I guess, motivated, externally connected, and have that external kind of perspective on what's happening in culture to deliver the best work?
Not easy. You know, you do the best you can. I think without speaking for the creative lead, I think you have to understand what they love. You know what I mean? What makes them excited? What are they passionate about? And those are the kinds of things you might have them lean into. What are they interested in getting some exposure to, and how do you get them exposed in that? And so, you know, I think what we try to do is, you know, I said we're a hybrid model, which means we use creative agencies for things and we use internal, you know, creative talent. But what I want to do is make sure we don't have this us and them. Well, are they going to do it or are we going to do it? Because if it's them, then it's not me, and if it's me, you know. And so what we try to do is say, I've got a creative center of excellence. That creative center of excellence has some creative talent internally, and they have the ability to leverage into third parties. And so even that model allows for them to move more into a leadership and sort of understand what it's like to manage third parties and so on. So I think really understanding the development interests of the individual help so that you can make sure they're exposed to the things that they enjoy.
Have you started?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. So, Mike, Sean Carney with IBM Watson Advertising and Weather. I have a lot of clients that ask me, okay, I know what a brand dollar, or I know what a performance dollar does for my business, but tell me what a brand dollar would do for my business. So I imagine you have a pretty good understanding of what your performance bucket does for return on spend. Do you know what a dollar of brand money does for your business?
I'm not going to give you a number on a dollar of brand money, but I will tell you we measure the things that are important to measure as much as we can. And I describe it that way because we're a big, complex organization. We've got hundreds and hundreds of, I don't even want to call them campaigns, marketing activations that are happening around the world. And we just don't have the need or bandwidth to lean into everything to make sure that everything is measured. And that's just the honest truth. What we do try to make sure is the things that matter most, certainly the things that have the biggest spend or the biggest impression or the biggest sort of critical importance. And there we do as much as we can to try to do test and learn control groups and understand what exposed means versus not exposed. And so it's not a perfect science. We have access to all of the traditional brand metrics platforms that you would imagine to understand if our spend correlates to movement in more traditional brand metrics. But a lot of it is really kind of test and learn to understand, depends on where the campaign is in the funnel, but to understand, is it moving needle on the metric that we were looking to make? And, can we find that correlation? And usually that's through control groups where possible. It's not always possible.
So Tia said that her customers that were acquired by seeing brand dollars,
Yeah.
not just performance dollars, are worth more to them. Do you have a similar?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll tell you, my perspective is, I think the stronger we can get with brands and brand love, the less we're going to be reliant on lower funnel. No doubt about that. And so, does that mean every dollar I spend on brand is going to perform better today than lower funnel? Well, probably not. It depends on the tactic. But is my intent to try to grow our brands to be brands that are loved? Yes. And if I do that, do I have to spend less on direct response? Probably. And so that's the spirit of it. And that's where this master brand, sort of IHG brand, comes in. I think if we can have more loyalty and brand love at that level, then you really need to spend less, maybe not zero, but spend less on the day-to-day fight for lower funnel. Yeah.
Excuse me. Have you started thinking about becoming a retail media network, a travel media network? I know Marriott kind of coined. You just have so much great first-party data.
Yeah.
And it kind of opens up revenue streams for you, not so much advertising to your customers. But
Yeah. So, not a new topic, a topic we've talked about through the years. And so never say never, but it has to be worth it. And to make sure that the value is there for IHG, the value is there for our owners. And so, nothing in the plans right now, but something that is explored.
Thank you so much for all the insights. Hayden here from New York. Two quick questions. One hopefully is quick, and the second one, will also be quick. Gotta get outside. The first one is you mentioned about your team structure, right? International as well as global. So how do you have your brand teams organized, or marketing in general with the international portion as well, right? So do you have teams that are based here in the U.S. that are, doing some of the work for there, or is it all based overseas? And then the second is around, you mentioned about all the different campaigns you're doing at the same time. How do you make sure that those with your different hotels and brands don't cannibalize each other? And what guardrails?
Well, I'll start with the second one. I think the benefit of having them all run through one centralized team, one of those benefits is measurement. One of the negatives of the old model was we had one campaign over here saying it was a wild success without realizing we dropped our biggest loyalty campaign of the year in the same month. And so having them together is helpful because we can understand what do we think actually had the impact. And the structure on how we would, let's say, run a big global brand campaign is we try to have one single point of contact that leads that marketing effort that connects into a network around the world. So let's say it's an intercontinental campaign that needs to come to life in the Middle East. One primary person that would connect in with our Middle East team that helps pull together the media plan or review the creative for the Middle East that comes back and gets laddered into a central global intercontinental campaign. And so it's kind of a hub and spoke that allows for us to stay connected with the people on the ground in the market who are best fit to identify media and creative for that market, but still have single point of contact for each brand.
And is that the same with branding, not just media and campaigns? Like the brand of the hotels, things like that?
As it relates to marketing, I know we're probably running out of time, but there is a broader brand organization which is responsible for everything from guest experience and brand positioning and food and beverage and all of those things. And if you think about that brand leader who has a seat, one of the seats at the table is a marketing person, that marketing person hardlines into the center.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Thanks, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.